In the tarot deck, we have 78 individual cards, and I think it can be easy to see those cards separately and forget that they belong to the deck as a whole. And there are certain principles that connects the entire tarot deck. And the main principle that comes to my mind is the idea of duality or polarity, this idea of opposites that runs through the tarot deck. And this comes up in the tarot as masculine and feminine, but this is a concept that shows up in other spiritual traditions as well. So probably the most well-known rendering of this idea is the idea of yin and yang that comes out of Taoist and Chinese philosophy, the idea of active and receptive, light and dark, masculine and feminine, this idea of two opposing principles that kind of give balance to each other. And other traditions such as Kabbalah, there's the pillar of severity and the pillar of mercy. In Sufism, you have the idea of Jamal and Jalal. And in Hermeticism, you have the principle of gender in the Kabbalion as one of the principles of Hermeticism. So not gender in the sense of not biological sex, but the idea of masculine and feminine, active and receptive. And this runs through the entire tarot deck, and we can see this really clearly with the start of the major arcana. So after the Fool, which is a bit of an outlier, here's card number 0, we have the Magician as card number 1 and the High Priestess as card number 2. So this masculine and feminine pairing here. After them, there's also the Empress and Emperor, which follow. So this real back and forth between masculine and feminine in the start of the major arcana. But you have with number 1, and 1 in numerology is a masculine number, this idea of initiating things, taking action, and that flows through to the aces. But with the Magician, this real active card, this very much a card of acting in the outward world, and he has the 4 elements of the tarot on his table, which constitute like elements of human life being in the world. The 4 elements themselves give rise to the physical world. And so the Magician is very much about how we can act in the world and exert our will. And then you have the High Priestess, which is pretty much a perfect counterbalance to that. She's very inward looking. Still, there's a sense of being with the High Priestess, just being, not having to do. The Magician is very much about activity and doing and making things happen, manifesting, getting results. Whereas with the High Priestess, there's much more a sense of just being, connecting to feeling, looking inward, and you have these really receptive symbols in the card of the crescent moon, for example, and the pool of water in the background, which is in tarot often associated with feeling. But the crescent moon, the moon is obviously the receptive out of the sun and the moon, the solar and the lunar principles. The solar gives off light, whereas the lunar is receptive to that and reflects it. And so when you see the moon show up in tarot, it can often be pointing to those feminine principles of receptivity, feeling, and intuition. And so the Magician and the High Priestess start off the major arcana with this duality between masculine and feminine, and we see it come up in other cards as well, like in the Lovers. This isn't a card that I would necessarily take as a human couple. It is a card that represents to me the tension between opposites, the dance between opposites, the pull between opposites, especially with the Lovers card. And this idea of duality of masculine and feminine, active and receptive, it runs all the way through the deck, even into the minor arcana cards. So with the 4 suits of the tarot, you have 2 suits that are masculine. You have Wands and Swords, so fire and air. These are masculine suits, they are masculine elements, and you have the feminine elements of water and earth with the suits of cups and pentacles. And so this masculine and feminine permeates the whole deck. And we see it come up again in the court cards with the kings and queens as well, especially. And you can see how these forces interact when you get something like the Queen of Wands compared to the King of Wands, where the King of Wands is a real double up on masculine energy, and he has a very kind of almost aggressive energy to him, very active, very much ready to go. Whereas something like the Queen of Wands, where you get a bit more of a balance between the masculine element of fire and the feminine queen position of the court, she seems a lot more balanced and tempered, and she is a very happy, positive card for that reason. You can also see this in some of the numbers with the cards. So the fours, for example, the masculine elements are much more balanced and stabilized. So the Four of Wands and the Four of Swords are quite happy, peaceful cards. But with the feminine elements of cups and pentacles, so water and earth, you get a bit too much stability with the number 4. And so the Four of Cups and the Four of Pentacles are kind of stagnant cards. And so this principle runs through the entire deck. It is good to note that I think in the modern world, in modern life, we have a real leaning toward the masculine. So this idea of the magician. So this idea of achieving, making things happen, exerting our will, looking outward. I think that comes very naturally to us these days, and we have a lot of engagement in the external world, a lot of stimulation from the external world. And something like the High Priestess, this might not come as easily to a lot of people. So just sitting with ourselves, sitting with what we feel, being very connected to what we feel on a deep level, without any kind of external stimulation or any kind of goal orientation or achieving anything, that can be very challenging. But it is also maybe more than ever a necessary balance for us in our lives. So things like meditation, introspection, looking inward, especially a practice like yoga nidra or non-sleep deep breaths, something where you're very passive and just like being aware of being present to the body, being in the body, something like a body scan, like which resembles yoga nidra. These type of practices can be a very good balance, but they can also be quite challenging to us because we're very used to being in the masculine and the external. So yeah, just a really quick rundown on the idea of the principles of masculine and feminine, active and receptive, that run through the entire tarot deck. And for that reason, the tarot itself is a lens that's kind of pointing us to get a balance between the activity and the repose, get a balance between the action and rest, and also between the 4 elements as well in our lives. And there is a saying of the Sufis that you can find the divine at the meeting of opposites.